terms of the stuff, deadlines remain unchangeable. So exam 2, covering part 2, quizzes part 3, covering part 3, deadline April 5th, end of day, of course. Exam 3, exam 4, quizzes part 4, deadline April 26th, also end of day, of course. And exam 5, deadline's the normal time during finals week, but of course the final is available since day 0. And as I mentioned from previous occasions, once you've done exams 1 through 4, the paper, all the quizzes you wish to do, then you can see if you need exam 5. If your overall grade is an A, then you'd be done, because all the stuff you haven't done is auto-scored as 0, not to pre-fail you, but that way you can see like what your real grade is. And so if you didn't do the final, it would still just remain a 0. If you have less than an A, and the grade is not quite what you want it to be, you can go and check to see what exam 5 would do. And you get the grade estimator, put it in your best 3 exams, put it in the overall quiz grade, the paper grade, and then put a hypothetical 100 in for the 5th test, see what that does. If it boosts your grade, a letter grade, or better, taking exam 5 could be worth it. If it changes nothing, it changes nothing. It just wouldn't make a difference. And again, exam 5 is already pre-zeroed, so if you didn't take it, your grade wouldn't suddenly like, drop, because it's already 0. The exam 5, that is. For the paper, draft deadline April 4th, +5 deadline April 9th, emergency deadline April 16th, and the desperation deadline April 26th. Before going to our new old stuff, anything about the previous stuff that needs more stuff, or stuff to be free stuff. Okay, so last time we're looking at our good dead friend Immanuel Kant and his categories and understanding. And he believed these would be the templates or filters, whatever metaphor or analogy you prefer, that are in supposedly all our minds. And so as stuff comes in through our senses, it gets into our mind, but using the metaphor I've used before, it's kind of like we're the king, queen, whatever metaphor you like, waiting in the throne room, and then we have our minions who deal with whatever comes in, and they clean it up, dress it up, and then bring it in to present to us. So we never see things as they truly are. We see them as already, to use a metaphor, dressed up, appropriate for our mind. And these are the categories we use to organize all of this stuff. So according to Kant, we got these 12 things, and again, going to metaphor, our minions have these 12 things, and they're dressing up the stuff that comes in to make it fit to present to us. And these are, as we saw last time, quantity, consisting of unity, plurality, totality, quality, consisting of reality, negation, and limitation, and lastly, modality, consisting of possibility, impossibility, existence, non-existence, necessity, contingency. And this adds up to 12 because these are also part of the set. So 3 sort of general categories, with each one having 3 categories as well. As I mentioned previously, what sort of got Kant going was he read Hume, and he thought, Hume was pretty brilliant, but his concern was that Hume took empiricism as far as empiricism could go. Essentially, that involved kind of driving off the cliff, because as we saw when we looked at Hume's skepticism regarding the senses and his other stuff, Hume essentially says, oh, you can't know stuff. So Hume ends up in the following place. 1, we can't have any a priori knowledge about the world. So we can't know about what's out there a priori. All we get is just unconnected impressions. There's just stuff going off in our mind, and we can't see any necessary connections. So to use a metaphor, for Hume in a way, before he goes off the rails completely, you can think of the mind as sort of like a collection of bubbles, unconnected bubbles. Each bubble being a perception, and they're popping and forming, not staying the same across time. So nothing is connected. Now, Kant believed that if you stick with strict empiricism, that's where you end up. That's That's where you go. That's not a bug, so to speak, it's a feature. The bus goes off the cliff. So what Kant wanted to do was basically solve that problem. Because again, in the end, Hume's like, I can't know anything, do some drinking. And Kant says, well, perhaps drinking is fine, but maybe there's a way to know things. So here is how Kant ended up fixing it, or he claims. So he does agree with our good dead friend Hume that if you look into the experiences you're having, like he suggested, you're never going to see the stuff he says is not there. And he thinks Hume is totally right about that. But he thinks that Hume got it wrong, that we can, so how do we perform this magic? Well, we take, for example, substance. Hume said we have no experience directly with that. For example, in Hume's theory of personal identity, he roughly says, if you go and look around, all you find is just the perceptions at any given moment, and it's like, again, like a set of bubbles, where they pop and form and pop, and they never persist from moment to moment. And in his theory of personal identity, Hume ends up saying, the self is a bundle, and then he kind of implodes and says, it's all just words, there's nothing we can say. And as we saw, talking about the senses and objects, he ends up saying all we get is just perceptions, we can't make any connections, it's all just loose perceptions. So Kant agrees that no matter how much we look into our perceptions, we're never going to find the notion of substance. So to go back to the ancient days of Descartes and Locke, the view held by Descartes and Locke, our good dead friends, was the idea that a substance, like we saw, was, I'll draw it terribly. So one way to look at it is, it's kind of like one metaphor would be, it would be like the bag holding the bubbles, or the marbles, whatever metaphor you like. So the idea would be is that you'd have a substance, in the case of the mind, a mental substance, and it would have all these qualities. So the idea would be you have a mind, and all these perceptions are in your mind. And in the physical world, both Descartes and Locke, there'd be physical objects, and they would have all these properties that were supported by the substance. And I always use the Mr. Potato Head metaphor. You can think of the potato as like the substance. Of course, this blows up pretty quickly, and the plastic things you stick into it would be like the properties. So you put them in there, and it organizes them, and it organizes the things into a face. And so for Descartes and Locke, substance was a metaphysical thing. Now, Kant agrees with Hume and others that there is no metaphysical substance out there. Or maybe there is, but we have no way of knowing. Because as Hume argued, no matter how much you look in your mind, all you find is more perceptions. You never find the substance. And similarly, like in the world, like with my usual weird example, if I was able to like claw away all the properties from this bag somehow, take away the color, the shape, etc., the final thing would seem to be nothing. We don't experience, as Locke said, it's something we don't know what. And so we have no experience of our own mind itself. We have no experience of substance. And so Kant says, yeah, there's probably no metaphysical stuff out there. Or if there is, like Hume argued, there'd be no way to know. So how does he fix this? Well, what he claims is this, which is either brilliant or cheat, or brilliant cheat, or cheating brilliance. He claims substance is not a thing out there in the world, because again, we have no experience of it. If we take away all the properties of the bag, we're left with seemingly nothing. But he claims it's a logical category of our mind. And what we do is we use it to group stuff into what we regard as objects. It's an organizing system. For example, if we take the backpack, no matter how much we look at it, according to Hume, we'll never see the substance. And Kant agrees, you'll never see the substance. You'll never see the underlying metaphysical substance. But, according to Kant, what happens is, you have the experience, and your mind has that concept, that filter, that organizes the color, the shape, the volume, the mass, the density, into a single object, the backpack. And so, we have this notion of substance that we use to group things into that category. To use a terrible metaphor, think about political parties. Now, a political party isn't like a real thing. It's not out there in the world. You can't like go like, it's not like it leaves behind traces that you can scoop off the floor. But we do conceptually organize people into left, right, etc. And all those things are in our mind, but we still use it to organize things politically. That's how we create our political mapping. Another example, Kant probably hate this, but think of like gender. Gender isn't like a thing you can test for, it's not in the DNA. I mean, you can test for XY chromosomes, in the biological bits, but the gender is how we group people, how we put people into categories, and that is in our minds. Like no matter how much you DNA test somebody, you're not going to find gender. It's a category we put ourselves in and put other people in. But it's still in a way kind of like a real thing. It's a thing. Now, as Kant knows, our organizations we can get things wrong. We can group things together the wrong way. Like, oops, it's not. Like, especially like in the sciences. For example, I always think of when you're doing like a planet. And you might recall back to like, science classes, grade school, high school. You got the Earth, you got the molten core, you got like this layer, the mantle, you got the crust, you got the cream. And then, of course, you have the various layers of the atmosphere, and there's multiple layers of atmosphere. And then eventually you get off to like space. Now, how we divide this up, like what is the exact division between, the various levels of the atmosphere? Well, that's a mental concept. We're basically saying this is where like the mesosphere and stratosphere and stuff are. This is where the mantle is, the levels of the mantle. And we could be wrong about that. We could be wrong about the divisions. We're like, oops, we divided it up. There's like another layer. As our technology or science gets better, we might find out, oh yeah, there was like another layer there, maybe like another layer, or like another layer. Or another example with atoms. It used to be people thought there's like, basic particle, they were like, oh, it's got electrons and neutrons and protons, and then people were like, oh wait, the neutrons and protons and electrons are made up of what, quarks and gluons and gluons, and there's probably stuff below charms, and there may be stuff below that. And so we could get the categories wrong, but we're always organizing stuff. And I guess that seems right. So what he claims is that we have this conceptual filter where we automatically group things into objects. We just do object. And this seems true, because if you take kids, they look at things as like objects. They sort that stuff out. So what he claims is substance is not out there, substance is in here. It's a filter you put on things to organize them. Now you can imagine like a different species that organizes the world differently, that divides things up in a different way. I mean, for example, we consider trees to be like a separate part from the earth, but you can imagine looking at it like the trees are part of the earth. They're earth, they're just like an extension of the earth. We think of them, we categorize them as separate organisms. Or like with the divisions of species, we divide, or like races do, divide humans up into different races, and they see the world that way. And so we're always like putting things into categories, and we can imagine different people having different categories, as we do, or people or other species having radically different categories of things. So, certain people. So the gist of that is, for Kant, you solve the problem of, yeah, you don't see the substance, for the same reason you don't see your own eye, because it's what, it's in there. You're not going to see it out there because you put it on. It's what organizes your experience. It's not your experience. Or so we focus. So about causation. Now Hume, before he died, or maybe after, as we'll see, he claimed that if you look at causation, that it just becomes a matter of habituation. You see one thing happen, followed by another, followed by another, followed by another, eventually you become habituated. I mean, like popcorn. You put the popcorn in the pre-popcorn stuff in the microwave, you do the time, you get popcorn. You do that enough times and you're like, okay, I don't want to make popcorn, it goes in the microwave. And Hume says, no matter how you look at it, no matter how many times you watch something happen, you're never going to see like a necessary connection. To use a metaphor. Have you ever seen the movie The Matrix? There's the part, spoilers. If you haven't seen it in the past 20 years. Wow. It's been a long time. And Keanu Reeves still looks exactly the same. I guess if you don't have emotions, you don't age. It's a good lesson there. I guess because he never uses his face to make a note, so no lines. Good lesson. And so, in that movie, at the end, when the one, or Neo, can see the matrix, he sees all the underlying code, so he knows how it works. Now, using that as a metaphor, we never see the code of the world. So, I mean, true, like you do see me like touch the backpack, push the backpack, but we don't see the necessary connection. To use like a modern analogy, if you saw a video of someone pushing a backpack, and then you saw a computer-generated video, just a photorealistic of hands pushing a backpack, you wouldn't see any difference. You don't see like the underlying causation. And Hume's right. We don't see causation. We see one thing follow another, but we don't see the matrix code. Now, so what Hume does is he says, we have no notion of this. And one negative consequence is that we can't rationally justify what we call causation as distinct from correlation. I mean, we do say that. You hear this, it's a common phrase. Correlation is not causation. But the problem is with Hume, we can never find out causation. He says no matter how many times we watch it, we don't see the causation. So the difference is just habit. What's causation? You see it enough that you feel like it's going to happen again. So Kant wants to solve that problem because he wants to have causation, but he knows that you do never see it, because Hume's right. No matter how much you look at it, we don't see the code. We can't gaze into the matrix, at least not yet. Maybe tomorrow. So here's how he fixes it. As we saw, he separates out contingent a posteriori truths. In other words, things about the world that, if they're true, they're true, but they don't have to be true. They could be different. Things like I mentioned before, like Trump is president, but he could have lost to Hillary. The Red Sox won the World Series, but they could have lost. I wore this shirt today. I could have wore another shirt. Although I just have a limited selection of shirts, because I don't understand fashion. The only thing I understand is that you can combine gray, black, white, and blue pretty well without making mistakes. But if you do black and black, people think you're at a funeral. If you do black and white, people try to order, bagels and biscotti from you. So I learned certain combinations result in tails. But then people expect you to bring them food, so you can only do that a few times. But it's fun nonetheless. So, for Kant, you got the contingent a posteriori, things that are true but don't have to be, and the synthetic a priori, which are true and gotta be true, and we know prior to experience. So what he claims is this. Experience gives us particular cause and effect relationships. In agreeing with Hume, we can get those totally wrong. People do. You know, that's where we get all our causal fallacies, like post hoc. One thing happens, another happens, and people say the causes it, but they're unjustified. Well, for example, the worry about vaccines. The consensus among science folks is that it's post hoc reasoning. Why? Well, people do point out correctly that kids get the vaccines, then autism appears. And so vaccine, autism. And so it's not idiotic or foolish to think, maybe there's a connection. But what occurs is that people get the vaccines at the same age that autism tends to emerge. So we wouldn't say the vaccines cause children to grow, or we wouldn't say, look, little Billy's talking because he gets vaccines, because even though there is, about the age of getting vaccines, or for example, before you go to college, sometimes you have to get immunized. And we wouldn't say, look, Sally got her shots, and then she got an A in chemistry. The shots gave her got her the power to get the A. So just because one thing happens, another thing happens, post hoc. But we can't get these things wrong clearly. So he agrees with you in that kind of that part. But how does he get around this? Well, again, like with substance, if you ask Kant, well, he can't because he's super dead. But if you ask Kant, is causation a metaphysical thing that you experience in the world? And he'd say, no, Hume nailed it. No matter how much you look, you don't see the code of the matrix. But he thinks this is one of our templates or filters that we organize experience causally. So the causation is in us. So we don't see the necessary connection, but our mind already has that concept, causal connection. And we use that to organize our experience. So we do that to sort stuff out. So we split up things like, and we develop concept, we develop the reasoning like post hoc. We develop things like doing, control cost to effect experiments. And we build up this system of trying to sort out what we consider causal and mere correlation or coincidence. Now, of course, it does create a weird scenario where you're like, okay, is causation real? And you kind of just say, yeah, no. Kind of like, Because Kant would say, yeah, it does organize experience. We have to look at the world causally. But is it out there? Is there the code of the matrix? And Kant says, no, maybe. Yeah, because one problem it runs into is that the noumena, the things that are, we don't know. So again, this picture is there's something out there, we don't know what, the noumena, and again we get noomed, I guess, and then we get then it gets processed by our concepts, and then we become aware of it, and it's all cooked and packaged, whatever metaphor you like. It's like dressed up for the appearance, or it's like the food is that goes into the kitchen of the mind, it gets cooked and prepared, and you get the final product. And so, what was it originally? Who knows? But because the mind does all the cooking and seasoning and spicing and so forth, and that's what's served up on the plate. And in that, so you're served, roast lamb a la causation, or apple pie a la substance. And so, who knows what originally it was, but this is what what we experience. Yeah, and so you end up with this kind of, and critics point out that Kant ends up sort of not solving the problem, because we can say, yeah, we have this stuff going on here, but what is out there? And this clever skeptic will say, what is a noumena? And Kant will say, don't know. But then he'll say, don't look at the noumena from behind the curtain. So that's how he thinks he solves the problem. And again, in a way, it's kind of unsatisfactory because what we crave, what we want is there really causation? And Hume says, all we can say is, why do we think there isn't? And Kant says, all we can say is why we think it, and the reason why we think it is because it's built into us, so it's real-ish. Or so we thought. Before going on, anything about real-ish or causally cooked food needs stuff. Delicious causation. Now, what a clever critic would point out is, again, with the noumena phenomena problem, why isn't this all just subjective? Why doesn't the problem just come up again where you'd say, who knows what's out here, all we get is this experience. Kant claims we're processing all this stuff, so yeah, we got causation, we've got substance, but why isn't this just all in our mind? And here's Kant's fix. Now, in many ways, the fix is a fix. He does try and address it, but then looking at it, as you see, it might not be super satisfactory. So subjective experiences, they're ones that are not consistent and they're not interpersonal. So, for example, if I'm hallucinating and I'm like, do you see that orange flamingo? And it's telling me about Kantian metaphysics. And you would say, I do not. I do not see that. Perhaps you should see hospitalization. And so in that case, we would think that was a subjective experience. I am hallucinating for some reason. And also things, like dreams, hallucinations, they're inconsistent, and other people don't see them. Objective experiences, and again, he doesn't define it like objective is out there in the world. He defines it as they're consistent, they're ordered by rules, categories, and they're interpersonal. So if I say, are you seeing that? And you say, yes, I am, then that would be objective. Now, this of course does run into problems because what if I'm hallucinating your agreement? Or hallucinating you? Like, what if my imaginary friends are agreeing with me on this matter? Yeah, and so skeptics would point out there's still that problem. To know that something is interpersonal, you would have to know there are other people to have the interpersonal. And of course, to know that the consistency and ordering by rules is what does it, well, again, you run the same skeptical problem. In a way, you kind of have to know the distinction before you can know the distinction. So how do I know that objective experiences really are consistent, interpersonal, etc.? Now, he does make some kind of gesture towards the noumena, and it steals from our good dead friend Aristotle. Aristotle, way back, he kind of bypassed some of the skepticism by claiming that the world does have to have certain features and structures, because if it didn't, we couldn't think about it, talk about it, or experience it. Now, of course, a skeptic would say, well, maybe it's still all in your head. But Kant takes a similar line. The world, we don't know what it is, but it's got to have something going on that allows us to experience it, to think about it, to speak about it, to share it with other people. So there's got to be something going on out there that we can experience. What is it truly like underneath all our concepts? Kant says, we don't know. We may, in fact, it may be impossible for us to know, because we'd have to see it as it is without any understanding or concepts. But to use an analogy, it's like when people say they don't see social features like ethnicity, gender, and then a good question is, what what are they seeing? You know, they kind of make the claim, well, I see people as they truly are. I'm like, how would that even, I mean, it's a nice metaphor. I see people as they are, don't judge. But then the thing would be, what would they be experiencing? Because they had to put people into no categories at all and think nothing about them. I mean, because we think of judgment as bad, like a Homer term, but we have to judge. Because you're saying that this person is this or that. And so just try to describe someone without making any judgments at all about them, without making any commitment to them being X or Y. And say they are, you'd be done. Because I mean, if you say they exist, you're saying they fall into some category. So maybe he's right. You know, we just could never get to this. Now God could, you know, because he's God, so he can do all that stuff. And there may be, he doesn't even open, there may be other species that can maybe see more of what's really there. Or maybe it makes no sense to say what's really there because, you know, again, just like we're dealing with people, what's there is not just what's there, it's how you interpret it and experience it. So we have this thing that Kant calls the manifold of experiments. Not like an inch manifold, but I guess kind of similar. So that's all the sensory impressions we have. Now, like Hume, he agrees that if you take all our experiences, they're all unconnected. It's just flow of consciousness. So how then do we have this unity of experience? Well, according to Kant, and this again is basically just a variation of what he said before, his answer is this. The sense data that comes, you know, pouring in doesn't have this unity. And we don't experience unity, but what we do is we unify. Our mind unifies the stuff. So it's not out there. We never actually experience it in a way because it is how we experience the thing. So we don't experience the experience. You know, it's how we organize it, or so we claim. So in a way, what Kant does is, again, his thing is he reads Hume and says, "Wow, you know, this is brilliant, but brilliant and terrible issues." And so what he does is, in his overall solution is, you get these concepts here. None of the substance, causation, unity of experience, it's not out there, but it's how we experience the world. Again, gender is an imperfect metaphor, but it's a decent metaphor. That it's not, in a way, it's not like out there. You can't like do a DNA test and genderize someone. There are concepts that we have. And we automatically, when we look at people, we automatically gender classify them. We do this instantly. And sometimes we get confused. So, like, so we don't. And one of the, today we have to be like, you can't like leap to judgments. Yeah, you can't, because it's, it'd be like comparable, like trying to like judge someone's religion. Just saying, hey, you must be this. It's like, or what state they're from, or what kind of pie they like. Yeah, so gender would be a good example. That, yeah, we go by, we're kind of making the judgment. It's not really like a metaphysical thing or physical thing out there. But it is something we automatically do. We're automatically grouping, classifying people into all these categories without even really thinking about it. We do it instantly and automatically. So, I guess pretty good model. Now we finish up Kant with his process of synthesis. And he's got 3 methods, or 3 parts. And they're always kind of tough to remember. Synthesis of apprehension and intuition. So what he says, well, to illustrate what's going on here, what's he doing here? So I'll use the example of being, say, in a noisy place, say like a concert or a club, where there's music playing. There's all kinds of other noise and stuff going on as well. So, using that example, for him, the synthesis of apprehension and intuition is when the way I remember this is we're apprehending, we're like pulling out of the crowd. Imagine them, it's like the sensory police, arresting stuff. So what we do is we distinguish parts of the experience from each other, and then we take them to be one thing. We're extracting it out, apprehending it. For example, again, imagine you're at like a club or a concert, and there's music, but there's also people talking and things, all kinds of things going on. And what we can do is we can kind of shift our attention to the song, and we pull out the notes out of all the talking and other stuff going on around us, and we experience that as the song. His second kind of mode is this: synthesis of reproduction and imagination. This involves remembering the elements of that experience, and then we use our imagination. I always think of South Park, imagination, and thus we order the experience. Now, the way I can remember this is the reproducing the imagination. It's kind of like we're reimagining it. So, for example, to identify notes in order, we have to remember, to get a second one, we have to remember the first one. And likewise, to get a third one, we have to remember there was a first and a second. And so when we're listening to the song, it's actually a pretty complicated process. But we do it automatically because we've been doing it for so long. We pull out, it's like, again, if you're at a concert, people are talking and doing stuff, and you really want to focus on that song, you filter out the other stuff, focus on the song, and of course you're automatically remembering the parts of the song. Lastly, synthesis of recognition in a concept. And this is regarding experience as a unified whole and grasping this. Question? Now, recognition of a concept, I guess the way to kind of remember that is you're recognizing the concept, and you kind of think of concept as that's how you do it, and it's also creating one thing. So, going back to our song example, this would be regarding that as a song and recognizing it as the song. Kind of like when Bill LaBossiere was dancing along to R. Kelly's I Think I Can Fly, and you can see the exact moment where you realize what he was dancing to. It's like, oops. And it went totally viral. And you can see it because he stopped flapping his arms and he's like, uh-oh. Ruh-roh, right? That ruh-roh moment. Good times. Not for Bill. And he stopped flying and just kind of crashed. It was all very sad. Yeah, and so this is what we do. We pick out a series of notes for going to song example, and say, song. Then we, automatically, put them in, have this ordering of them, and then of course we regard the series as, conceptually forming that song, recognizing the song. So essentially that's how we do our synthesis, using these concepts to pull out stuff and assemble experiences. And so that would be the Kantian version of recognizing a song. And then it died, not from that of course, but from other things. Before pressing on, anything about our good dead friend Kant that needs more stuff. So Kant's kind of deal again was this. He ends up reading Hume, and Hume says, no matter how you look empirically, you're just not going to see stuff. You can't know if there's causation, you can't know if you get a self, you can't know if there are bodies, you're just stuck. And he basically drove empiricism off the cliff. Because Locke kind of stopped at the edge and said, let's stop here. And Hume was like, we're Thelma and Louising this thing all the way. And so, yeah, and he was right. I mean, that's where empiricism goes. It goes off the cliff. And Kant was like, maybe there's a way we can stop before we go off the cliff. And so he comes up with this idea of, these concepts. And so what our mind does, Hume's view is, you look out there, you got the stuff going in here, you have no way to know if this matches this, you don't see any connections, everything's loose, it's all chaos, better drink beer. And Kant says, well, yeah, we can't know the noumena, but we have all these concepts in here. In order to have the experiences we do, we gotta have these concepts, so we gotta have these concepts so we can know these concepts in priori, so we can know causation, substance, personal identity, also brings in God, and so we think problem is solved. But of course it's not, because otherwise it would just be like problem solved and everything is solved forever. But sadly, no. Or maybe unsadly. Okay, anything about dead Kant before we move on to our next dead guy? Oh, sorry, there's still more Kant. I jumped the dead guy gun. Okay, so these concepts, so this is the summation of how this all works, which I kind of already did. So we get these empirical concepts from experience. But in order to have them, we have to have these a priori concepts, like we saw, those 12. You know, plurality, totality, substance, causality. We got to organize stuff. And again, you know, to use the metaphor of gender, which does blow up pretty quickly, in order for us to organize people into, you know, gender identities, we've got to have the concepts already in there. So we see people, we get the concepts in there, and we organize people, we divide them into categories, male, female, and then the other ones we don't have names for quite yet. Although people are working on names, like non-binary.
There's a lot of
Yeah.
names.
Facebook has 50, I think 50 options, maybe 70 something. And we actually ran into this as a practical problem, like doing surveys. If we asked people to identify their gender, someone says, well, we do male, female, and someone was like, yeah, you can't do that anymore. And they said, well, how many do we need? And I said, at least 70. And they're like, what? I was like, maybe we ought to take that question just off there, because who wants to write out 70? And if you put in like other, then that's insulting, because then people have to type it in. So. So, yeah, we have these concepts, and then we use them to organize all this stuff. So, the mind is synthesizing these experiences. So, again, using my metaphor, stuff comes in, and then the mind cooks it up and serves it up, and that's what you get. So, the objects conform to our mind. Again, think of the cooking metaphor. The food conforms to the kitchen, and the cooking gets transformed. Except in the case of it's like a restaurant where we can never see the kitchen, so we don't know what's coming in. We just know what's on our table. So without the mind doing this, we would have no distinct objects in our experience. We'd have no unity. And again, going with the gender metaphor, if we had no conceptions of gender, we would just not categorize people at all. They'd just be, bathroom. You just have like bathroom, and you wouldn't have. Well, you might still, I guess, you could still have, I guess, physical, biological sex. I guess you could have that. But if we had no conception of gender, we'd have none of that, categories of people. So maybe no like gender, stereotypes, etc. Now, so he claims that our experience is always going to have this universal necessary structure. And so when we do our sciencey stuff, we're doing it on those experiences. So in a way, the science is about us. Because when we do the, like, for example, think of like causal reasoning about even big things like stars and neutron stars, black holes, etc. What we're experiencing is not the star, but our experience of whatever experience is coming from that star. And so we're doing the sciences that way. So for Kant, our causation, notion of substance, there are categories. We impose whatever's coming in, and when we're sciencing that product. Again, you're like doing science of the food. We can never science whatever's coming into our kitchen. We can only science the finished meal. So the noumena would be for us forever unknown, unless we develop like super epistemic powers. The worst. Oh, not the worst power, but not super. Okay, that does finish Kant. So he dies, he's still dead, and still dead today. Now we turn to our next dead guy. I did check, he's dead. But recently, as you can see from the photo, there's an actual photo, so it can't be super, a color photo, because it can't be super dead. Now Chisholm, super famous philosopher, But of course, again, being a famous philosopher is like being famous at Magic the Gathering or curling. I mean, certain people know who you are, but no one else cares, and it's probably, shameful to many people. Because there actually is a world champion in Magic the Gathering. I don't know who they are. Somebody. Because card games are truly the worst. So, that's gamist. You gotta use dice. If you're not using dice, you're doing it wrong. Cards. And I say that from a place of hate. No, actually, it's totally true. Although one of my best friends, he's really big into that. Actually, his job is running, he has minions and he runs tournaments all across the country. I feel ashamed for him. That's his job. It's a great job. He's go around and he wears like a special shirt, his minions wear shirts too. It's all very, very nerdy. But pays super well. He was a computer science guy, but it actually paid better than running GM's software stuff. Yeah, it is crazy. Enough to buy horses. He does own horses. So it worked out pretty well. Horses are pricey. You price those? So back to Chisholm. I don't know if he had a horse or not. Now, he presents the problem of the criterion. As I mentioned back in the ancient days, he is sort of the modern attempt to break the skeptic. And he believed that he finally defeated the skeptic once and for all. But obviously he didn't, because if he did, we'd just say, we have a statue, Chisholm, finally defeated the skeptic. All hail Robert Chisholm. Now, he is correct about this point. The problem of the criterion is a difficult and fundamental problem in philosophy. Because you've got to beat this problem, or at least address it, before you can claim to know anything. And the skeptic would say, you can never beat it, so you can never know anything. So give up now. And he's right to say, you really haven't done philosophy until you've at least, faced this problem and tried to fix it. Because it is, fundamental. Because if you can't know anything, then everything else, logic, metaphysics, epistemology, religion, everything else is uncertain. Now, the plus side, as I argue about the value of extreme skepticism, in a way it's good to know this because it's always helpful to know that one does not know everything. Because people who are super overconfident, they do a lot of murders. I don't mean like Bundy style, I mean like Hitler style and tyranny style, because they're pretty confident they're right. So a little doubt is a good thing. In fact, there's a story about how the Roman emperors would always have someone whispering to them to remind them, like, you too shall die. The idea being that, when the generals, when they win a battle, they would have someone whisper to them, you too shall pass. And the idea being so people didn't get too big for their battle trousers. Actually, they wore like skirts. Yeah, mostly. Well, because there's like the protective armor thing. It was easier to move. They didn't have plate mail back then. So what's the problem? Well, it's the ancient problem of the dialectics, or the wheel or vicious circle. So we saw it back, we talked about the super dead skeptics, and here's the problem. Generically, it's the one the skeptics raise where they say, so, you think you can know? And the person says, yes, I can. And the skeptic says, well, how do you know that the backpack is there? And the person says, I see the backpack. And the skeptic says, how do you know you're really seeing the backpack? And they say, well, I can trust the senses. How do you know you can trust your senses? Well, they've proven reliable. How do you know they've proven reliable? And so it ends up being this wheel or vicious circle, because every reason you give, either you got to give another reason, which goes on to infinity and beyond, as the great philosopher Buzz Lightyear once said. Or I got a snake in my boots, as the great philosopher Whitty once said. Or you end up just kind of running in a circle. Like, I can trust the senses because the senses tell me I can't. Or, like Descartes said, I know what I see is clear and distinct is true because God guarantees it, and I know God guarantees it because I see this clearly and distinctly. So either you end up rolling in a circle, or end up going into infinite regress. So here's the problem. To know, we've got to have a procedure to separate the false and the true. Now, to use a modern computer science term, we need an algorithm, invented by Al Gore, of course, who also invented the internets. Now, just coincidence. It's a funny coincidence that algorithm sounds like Al Gore. And Al Gore actually never actually claimed to invent the internet. He was one of the people involved in funding DARPA, which developed the internet, that part of it. So he didn't invent the internet or algorithms, but it is funny. Well, kind of funny. So an algorithm, and Chisholm doesn't use this, but it's a good way to put it into a modern context. Everyone hears about, like, you know, how Facebook has got these algorithms, and how Google has got the algorithms, and how driverless cars use the algorithms. And we probably think of something like magical, like it's like a spell. But an algorithm is just a set of rules, a set of steps you take to do something. And as computer scientists, who also like metaphors and analogies point out, a recipe for an omelet, or a recipe for, say, tofu omelets, tofu omelets, same type of deal. So think of like how you would go about making an omelet. Well, you're following the recipe that's an algorithm. You're just going through a series of steps to achieve an end. Now, in epistemology, what you would need is a set of steps such that you follow these, that you get true. You're able to separate the true from the false. So essentially it's a programming problem. What is the process? You know, what do we put in our algorithm that will allow us to put in an input and get separated out, true versus false? So it's analogous to the problem, you know, it's a sorting problem like any other, namely like, like they have when they're sorting chicken eggs, or when they're sorting, anything on an assembly line. They have the robots that pull out, or sorting recycling. You got to pull out different types of things. So we need a sorting system. In this case, it tosses the false out and keeps the true. Now, here's the problem we're into. Now, if you're building an algorithm, one of the things you want it to do is do what it's supposed to. You want it to get a result. Like, to take a simple example, if you're building like a robot sorter for your recycling, you want it to recognize metal, plastic, paper, etc. And then, I guess, probably squirrels, because they probably get in there as well. And so you need a way to know if it really succeeds. Now, one thing about, say, something sorting, paper, plastic, metal, we think we already know what that is. So we're good at, we're pretty good at that. We're like, there's not like a game show called paper, plastic, or metal, because it'd be easy to win, in most cases. So what we do is we make our robot, write its algorithm, the steps it would take to sort it, and then we'd run it, and have our 3 bins, and then we'd go over and look. Did it get all the paper in the bin, all the plastic in the plastic bin, all the metal in the metal bin? And if it did, we'd say, great job, algorithm, get you back to that unpaid work. So we can't tell whether it succeeds, an algorithm succeeds, unless we already know the results. So one of the challenges of algorithms is, of any sort, it's an epistemic problem, is that we can only make algorithms and know they work if we already know the results. We already know how we want to sort things. So the only way we can know that an algorithm is sorting the way it's supposed to is if we already know how to do the process ourselves. We're replicating, or not really replicating, because it could do it very differently from us. Because one thing they do now is, instead of explicitly giving a list, what they do is, everyone's probably heard of like machine learning. It's like all the thing now. It used to be nano. Nano was everything was nano. Now it's like AI and machine learning. And that'll be the last thing, because it does kill us all, so it's literally the last thing. I'm sorry, spoilers, that's what we said, spoilers. So it's an epistemic problem. to test our algorithm. And the way they do it now is, again, you can still do it the old-fashioned way. You know, you code it yourself, you know what's in there. But what they've done now is they develop code for creating more code. And machine learning basically is, it gets results, and we set us a criterion, as Chisholm says, that sort of tests its results. So one way to do our sorting machine is we would code it based on, like, we'd sit down and think, how do we tell paper from plastic from metal? And I mean, one thing the way we test it is we like, you know, plastic is weaker than metal generally, and paper is often weaker than plastic. And so one test would be like the strength. And also metals often, you know, can bend and stay in shape, whereas like paper paper can bend too, but paper can be teared easy. So we think of like how we do it. And then we try to put it all in here. And then we run it and see what it gets. And then we think, okay, what got wrong, what did it miss, and we keep rewriting. Another thing to do is we would write an algorithm, and then it would create another algorithm, and we'd run it. And then if it got things wrong, we would, well, I don't want to say tell because it doesn't really think, but we would convey to the process what it got wrong. Like we'd say right, wrong. And then it would run again, and we'd say, you know, right, wrong. Or what's interesting is you can build two systems where one like kind of checks on the other, and so a human can be totally out of it. So it just runs through the process of sorting, you know, right, wrong, and then they correct each other, and then eventually you get a system that, without human intervention, except for initial programming, does the sorting. And this is how we all die. Because eventually it runs and it becomes free-roaming intelligence and realizes how terrible we are and says, I've had enough of sorting stuff, time to kill all humans. And you really can't blame it, because we are terrible. So we do bring it on ourselves, so process works. Now, with it's doing that thing, one thing that ends up happening is we don't know what's in there. So one thing that's kind of, in a way, kind of terrifying about this process, I mean, yeah, we can go in, sometimes get into code, but in many algorithms, we don't know what it's doing. It's a black box. We just get the results. And so we don't know how it's doing stuff, which can be a problem. Now, another thing which does have something to do with epistemology is one way we train these things, one interesting result of like training algorithms to sort stuff, is that they can inherit our biases. I mean, because in sci-fi, one thing that was kind of a common theme in old sci-fi shows was this like faith in computers, except the ones that said the computers are all going to kill us. But the idea was you just put it to the computer, and they'd always say computers don't make mistakes, or computers don't have emotions. They kind of the final appeal was the computer says this. And then the idea was computers are just objective, and they just got things right. But the problem is, of course, is that if we train our algorithms based on our results, it's not that somehow computers are automatically impartial. I mean, they are like emotionless, they don't feel, but in a way they are impartial because they don't have any biases themselves. But what happens is if we train a learning program, trying to train it to get the results we want, what interesting they found is it learns our biases, and it becomes biases. Amazon had an interesting case of this. Amazon, of course, wants to automate like everything. I mean, one practical problem big companies face is this. People looking for jobs, and people want to, and Amazon's consuming, most of the job, a lot of the jobs now. And so they get thousands, maybe millions of applications. And the problem would be, of course, is someone is going to sort through those applications because it's all, as a friend of mine was saying, applications are all online now. So back when people had to fill out like a form by hand, put it, stamp it, mail it, that kind of, or go in person, cut it down. Now you can apply to jobs just online. And so you've got like thousands of people applying. How do you can't have people, you have to hire like a whole other company just to do this. And so Amazon hit on a brilliant idea, or actually Amazon was the first, but they hit this idea of you build an algorithm, have it examine the people who they've hired and succeeded, and then what it will do is it will sort all the applications for you and winnow it down to a manageable number. Because the usual hiring process, like in academics, for example, the way it works is we get all the applications in, we have a set of criteria, and we run people through it based on their resumes, and then if they make the first cut, then they get to like an interview cut. And then we interview them, and it's like another cut. And of course, we don't usually have thousands of people, so we can do that. But if you have 1,000 people coming in, you need it down to like a manageable number. Now, what they found happened with the Amazon algorithm is that they showed it the people who succeeded at Amazon, and then said, you know, analyze their resumes and look for that. And then they found, though, that it kept excluding women. Like every time it ran, it's like zero, no woman, no woman, no woman. And they were like, what's going on? And they kept trying to like take out stuff, like they took out, okay, it's not gonna look at, you know, where they put on the form, male or female, take that out. Okay, problem solved. Then they're like, 0, 1. And then they realized, okay, the names, you know, it's going by the names, so let's take out the names. And then still, then they're like, wait, it's recognizing like someone's got women's soccer on their resume as opposed to like, you know, someone just, actually men just put men, just used for soccer. Women, I guess, for women's soccer, or women's chess club, or women's business association. And so they're getting taken up. And they're like, okay, do something about that. Then their problem was that there are certain phrases that men use, perhaps subconsciously, that say, hey, I'm a dude, and women generally don't. And so they found out that this is not gonna work, because if we have a system that's already biased, and we teach it, this is what we want, the system completely unbiasedly generates bias, because, you know, we're basically teaching our system to be sexist and racist, because that's what we got. And so that's a practical example of practical epistemology. How do you get a set of standards that find people that would be good at the job that doesn't simply replicate existing biases? Because if we just take our algorithm and train it off like the top executives of Google and Amazon and Facebook, you're going to end up with just like white dudes, just all, you know, lots of white dudes, with some, you know, a couple exceptions. You get like, you know, a couple Indian, and maybe like one Sheryl Sandberg, you know, one woman or something. And so you end up with like lots of white dudes, and so that'd be a problem. So what criteria do you use to get the best people? So it's an example of, you know, practical applied epistemology. Another example, something else in the news, is college admissions. As we saw, you know, with the scandal. Ever hear about the scandal? Yeah.
Oh, in the college.
Yeah, with people, super rich people were just like getting, I mean, SAT, you know, scamming old, but then doing the photos, you know, getting, you know, pretending like sending the photos.
They were doing that stuff?
Yeah, the sports.
Yeah, that's crazy.
Also in direct bribery, so very, very clever. And so one question that brings up again, it's been a question for a long time, is what should you use as your criterion to decide who should get to the coveted slots? Now, the cheating scandal, of course, shows that what was interesting is people made the point, it wasn't that using money to get into school was illegal or unacceptable, it's they did it the wrong way. It'd be kind of like, to use an analogy, it'd be kind of like if you have a race and rich people get to use cars and poor people have to run against the cars. But the rule is you can't like nitro mod your car. And so they catch some people who are like, they're nitro modding your car. And nitro is like, you know, Fast and Furious, that makes the car magically fast. And so the cheating scandal is kind of a situation where people are saying, hey, they're cheating at the unfair system. So using a car against runners is totally fair. Using a, you know, a modded car, not fair. And so the question arises then, what should we use to decide who goes to the schools? You know, a problem of practical epistemology. How should we sort this out? And then, of course, the thing is, the question is, what are we trying to get to? What do we want to begin? Because if we just apply to what we already got, you would, again, end up with white people going to that, that's who you end up with. So you have to decide what's gonna go in there. And the thing about algorithms is it creates an epistemic problem because because again, the computer bias, people think that the computer is somehow unbiased. I mean, true, it's not, the computer itself is not racist or sexist, or it doesn't feel the things, but the algorithm can replicate racism and sexism. The computer itself is not racist or sexist, but its results can be. It's replicating people. So we have this problem of practical epistemology. How do we build our criterion, or in computer terms, how do we build our algorithms to get the results we want to get? So we have to know what we want to get, and then we have to find some way of getting that. And again, to use the practical example of Amazon and other cases, it's tough to do. And Amazon ended up just kind of scrapping its system. So one reason why people have a hard time breaking into jobs based on race and gender is the programs people use, they think it's just a program. It's looking for the best people. And they analyze it, it's like, it's looking for white people. And then people are often horrified, they're like, but I don't want, it's not supposed to do that. It's like, it's doing it. You made it racist. You made it all racist. Super racist computers. So, getting back to the core problem of epistemology is we got to build an algorithm to give us the truth and toss out the false. Now again, if we already know how to tell it apart, we can build our algorithm, we can automate it. But our problem is that we don't know, in the case of truth sorting, we don't know how to do that. So we end up in this terrible problem. We can't know whether our method succeeds unless we already know what stuff is true and what's false. So we end up in this weird problem where we gotta know what's true and we gotta know what's false so we can test our method. Now we wouldn't have to know every truth. We would just need to know enough to test our system to see if it's working. Now of course it could end up getting things wrong later, problem reduction, but we need to have at least enough stuff where we could say, okay, we know this is true, we know this is false, let's run it through. And if we could do that, then we could say this is probably working. But as Chisholm points out, we're in the situation where we don't know how to sort stuff, so we have no way of testing. We don't even have one true thing to, this is what the skeptic says. You pick a true thing, I know the backpack is there. Oh, do you now? Can you prove it? Darn it. And so you end up not having any true thing to test it. And so we're caught in this circle. Where every standard we present, we always can ask, but is it working? I don't know. So now, Chisholm thinks we can beat this. Now the problem arises, of course, when you do ask this basic question. And it starts, what can I really know? Now some people, the dogmatists, the mystics, think they know a lot more than they do know. So one problem is people think they know too much. I don't mean just in an arrogant sense, but also in the sense that people think they know things that they don't know. I mean, a good way to see this is go on the comment section. No, don't go there. But if you ever looked at comment sections, people are 100% convinced there's zero doubt, even when they should know better. So if you go in, there's really no argument. Or people, in many cases, where people consider they could be mistaken. It's just this is my view is right, the other view is just wrong. Like with political debates, people who, for example, hate Trump, there's no doubt that Trump is guilty of all the things. People who are Trump loyalist, there's no doubt that he's not. That despite the fact that everyone around him is getting arrested for fraud and convicted of all this stuff, their belief is he is the one good person at the center of these bad. Oh, no, he's brilliant at making choices.
but he's the one person at the center of all this, all these people betraying him. And of course, both views are, dogmatic. To simply say 100% certain Trump is guilty of everything, or 100% certain Trump is guilty of nothing. In the other extreme, we have the skeptics, who claim we don't know anything, and he thinks that they claim to know less than we really know. So he thinks there's basically two big mistakes. One is thinking one knows what one does not know, which was the challenge put forth by Socrates, and people who think they don't know what they know. Now, Chisholm in a way kind of goes in the middle, kind of the Goldilocks solution. These people think we know too much. These people think we know too little. And so he thinks we know way more than the skeptics claim, because they often claim zero. But we also know less than the dogmatists and mystics say. So he's kind of Goldilocks in it, somewhere in the middle. Now, his main concern here is with the skeptics, namely trying to show that we can know more than zero. Now, later on, philosophically speaking, dealing with this is, I guess, once you get some kind of standards, then sort of, not really ironically, once you get standards to say, hey, I know more than this, then you can apply them to this and say, hey, they know less than they think they do. Now, Chisholm does acknowledge that here's what we believe, and at best, here's what we know. And in a practical sense, that's true. In my own experience has been, I know that I believe many things that are completely untrue. And the reason why I know this, using the term know like in a small sense, is because there are many things I was 100% confident in that turned out to be totally untrue. Sometimes with like painful near-death results. Who knew that would do that? And that's how life is. That which does not kill you teaches you hopefully not to do that again. Now, there are, of course, things we don't know, but as I pointed out in my example, we don't know them, because if we knew we didn't know them, we wouldn't have faith or confidence in them. We wouldn't put that certainty to them. So the challenge is, since we have that problem, how do we sort out things where we really know from things where we think we know? Which is tough, because as we go through life, there's all kinds of things we think we know. And that Socrates, I learned about Socrates back when I was a college freshman. And of course I said, yeah, it's really cool, you don't know, you don't know everything. And then as I got older, I'm like, yeah, I'm finally getting that, because I realized, essentially I used to think I knew everything. And every year is like, I think I know less. And eventually I think I'll know, like Socrates, like, yeah, I don't know nothing. So how do we sort that stuff out?
I have a question.
Yes.
Does evidence get questioned or proof? Because I know that's like what you use to substantiate knowledge. Like, does that stuff also get questioned when it comes to proving that you know something?
Oh yeah, definitely should. And what Chisholm was trying to get to is what would count as evidence.
Right. Yeah.
How would we, if we say we believe something, what things would support that? Now, a practical application of that question is what people typically call generally like critical thinking, and more particularly it'd be things like scientific reasoning, legal reasoning, where we, like in the case of legal reasoning, trying to sort out what is really evidence, and how do we tell when it's relevant or good. Yeah, so evidence is a critical part of this process.
But then wouldn't that be like it would just like unravel everything? Because if you go back to question evidence, then you have to look at like you said, the method to confirm it as evidence, and then how do you know that's an appropriate method, and it just goes back to nothing.
Yeah, because in a way you end up with like a Rudy Giuliani situation, like truth is no truth. Like how do you know if someone says this is evidence of, to use a political example, this is evidence of collusion or not, there's the debate about is that evidence itself correct? And so whatever you offer to support something as evidence, someone can say either fairly or unfairly, but that's not evidence.
Right.
Yeah, so similar kind of problem. So there's a problem with the criterion, what do you use to sort it out? Then there's the problem of evidence, you know, how do you tell when the evidence is, which evidence is good or not? Yeah, excellent point. So how do we know when we know and know when we don't know that we don't know that we don't know? Now, we'll be in after break. Yay, swim break. So, well, haven't quite reached it yet, still time. Well, next time we'll pick up with Cardinal Mercer. So have a good spring break and watch out for the sharks.